You're
All
good to
right. Okay. So, welcome everybody. I'm delighted to be here with you today, and I am talking about one of my favorite subjects, which is branding. And I really think of myself as being a brand evangelist. That I think that branding is one of the most important things any business can do, particularly small and medium-sized businesses. You know, big business, big businesses do not need my help. I'm not Nike, not Costco, but what I can do is, and what I love to do is to sort of get in and Rolf the brand, if you will, with small businesses. And we're going to talk a lot about that today. About me, very quickly, which is that I've been doing branding a long time. I started out in television as a television producer, sort of thinking that that was my path, which it was for a long time. And really what I've come to realize in being a marketer and a brander for really, too many years to recount, is that television is ultimately branding. And I learned how to shape stories and how to communicate to an audience and how to shape perception, which are the three sort of, legs of the branding stool as a television producer. I have worked I've run my own agency for a long time. I was marketing and branding in higher education, Harvard, MIT, Sarah Lawrence for many years. That was particularly fun for me because shaping the brand of a college or university was really challenging. Most colleges and universities don't think they need brands, they're just good. And one of the things that I will say, and I have said really ad nauseum for my whole career, is being good is not enough. You have to tell people why you're good. And we're going to talk about that a lot today. So speaking of today, we are going to talk about branding your business. What a surprise. We're going to talk about finding your value and what value means. We're going to talk about what I call your benefit promise. And what's that? That's the promise that you make to your clients or your consultants. And the core of what we are going to talk about is telling your story. And this is where I differ from many of the branding aficionados and agencies that talk about how to do your brand. Mine is not a cookie cutter. Mine is an approach that says that branding has to be organic in order to be authentic. Everybody can spot a fake brand. If you're pretending to be something that you're not, or it doesn't grow from inside, it will not work. And we're going to talk about that. And finally, we're going to have a lot of time for Q&A. And in that Q&A, you can ask me questions of any sort. And we're also going to have a section before we get to the Q&A where we're going to workshop a few of your stories, and I'll tell you more about that as we go along. Let me also say that there's a lot of information to cover here, a lot. But we're going to get as much in as we can. However, I don't see this as a lecture. I really see this, and I do a lot of webinars, that it's a conversation. And that means that you can put your question in the chat if suddenly you have not necessarily a comment. What I prefer in the chat as we go along are questions so that I can address those. So think of this less as a talking at you and more as talking with you, even though I'm going to go through this material pretty quickly. So without further ado, why you need a brand? Let me just say that brands are not nice to have for small business, particularly for small businesses, whether you're a consultant or whether you're a flower shop. You have to have a brand. You cannot succeed without one. And why, again, this goes back to being good is not enough. The converse of that is, if we're good, they will come. Well, they're not going to come unless you shape the perception. And shaping perception of your business is about building your brand. It builds loyalty and trust. We do business with people we trust, period. And we are then loyal to those people, whether you're a business owner, a consultant, some sort of service industry, an accountant, a bakery, it doesn't matter. We do business with people we trust, and we immediately don't do business with people that somehow don't value and respect us as a client or a customer. You need a brand because you have to compete in the marketplace, right? Whether you're a little bookstore, an independent bookstore, or whether you're a life coach, it's a crowded marketplace. There's no question about it. And you have to figure out, and this is an essential part of branding, you have to figure out why you are different and why it matters. And we're going to talk about how you're going to figure that out. And that increases loyalty. Okay. If you stand for something, and that's a really important part of value. Each business, I don't care what it is, has to stand for something. And what that means is being about something that's bigger than you are. And I'll show you some examples of what that means. One example I'll use is that if you are an eco-friendly cleaning service, it isn't just about a clean house. It takes it to that upper level of we care about the environment. We stand for environmental principles and standards. And that makes me want to, if I care about that stuff, that means I'm going to do business with you rather than the other cleaning services that are vying for my business. You have to create a clear identity. A brand is a clear identity. An identity means that I know who you are, and by you, sometimes I mean you, the owner, or the client. I mean, or the consultant. But it really means that I have a clear idea of your business, what it is. It's like knowing the person next door. Businesses, at their at the end of the day, represent the personality and the character of the owner, of the people who run those businesses, and we give them an identity. Brands are personal. There's no question about it. Brands are not just about facts, not just about the hours that you're open, not just about your website or about your menu. They are about an emotional connection with your customer, and we're going to talk about that. And I apologize to the consultants here. I will default to the word customer, but I also mean client. You have to be recognizable, and you have to figure out how to boost that recognition, because ultimately all the things that a brand has to do in order to work will sustain your growth and the future of your business. Okay, so what the heck is branding, right? Because it's one of those things that you talk to anybody. First of all, everybody thinks they're a brander. Okay, but if you ask 3 people what branding is, you're going to get 3 different answers. It's a foggy concept, and it's become so ubiquitous that it's really lost any meaning. And let's just talk about the difference for a moment. The difference between branding and marketing. Branding is the core of marketing. Branding is the engine that drives a marketing strategy or a plan. They are not the same thing. You cannot go out with a marketing plan if you don't have a solid brand that you are actually telling people about, and which your marketing and your advertising is built on. And your marketing will reflect all of the core elements of your brand. And your marketing takes that brand out into the world. I have a train here because drives the engine, blah, blah, but that's why the train is there. So branding is emotional. You are trying to make an emotional connection with your existing and your potential clients and customers. It is a hearts and minds campaign. And by that, I mean, the minds is sort of the logical, rational, here's the list of what we do and all the things that you can buy from us. But it's really the heart is the emotional connection. And we're going to see some examples of that in a minute. But the emotional connection means that you're appealing to something that is not necessarily tangible, but which is critically important, because the emotional connection embodies the promise. What is it that you're promising your clients and your customers? What are the values that your brand imbues? What is your identity? And I'll say one thing about identity again, which is that the good news about branding is that it shapes perception. You have the ability to shape how you are perceived, how your business is perceived. There's also a flip side to it, which is if you don't create a brand, then people are just going to make it up. And that's never a good idea. You do not want kind of murky perception about what it is that you do and what you're selling. You have the ability to shape that conversation, to shape that narrative. And that's what branding does. You set a boundary and you say, this is who we are, this is what we stand for, this is why it matters, and this is why you should care. And that way you're in control of how people talk about your business. The heart of branding is stories. And we're going to really delve into that next. People remember stories. They're not going to remember a long list of, sort of hard, cold facts. What they're going to take away from their interactions with you and your business are the stories that you tell. So let's talk about stories. What's a story? Well, first of all, we're all storytellers. So you can, if you're gasping and saying, I can't tell a story, I can't do this, I can't do that, well, get over it, because we're all storytellers. And when we think about our businesses, we have so many stories that we can tell. And I'm going to give you some good examples of those. But stories make sense. Make sense of your business in your community. And when I say community, I'm not just talking about down the street. A lot of you do business out of state, far away, globally, nationally. So you can define your community, but your community is your group of potential and current customers. Stories make sense out of what your business stands for. They build genuine connection. I'm going to give you examples of all this, and people remember the stories that you tell. So I love this quote: people may not remember what you said, but they will remember how you made them feel. The best stories come from the heart. So the small service business story is important, and is based on relatable stories about real people, your customers, yourself, the origins of your business, anything that relates to your passion, your vision, and why you are running and started this business. It also helps people to understand what you're actually selling, the product, whether it's you as a consultant, as a life coach, or you as a financial services, as a small financial services firm. Stories about real people will immediately say, oh, I get that. That's me. That could be me. This is a business that's good for me. Stories are about why you offer what you offer. Your stories are about who it impacts. In other words, who benefits from what you do. And again, this is the overarching criteria. Why does it matter? So it's really important, and we're going to sort of break all this down, that you've got to focus on your customer. I am famous for saying, you've got to narrow the scope of who you want to talk to. First of all, you got to figure out who you're talking to now. Who do you want to talk to later? And then you've got to define your lane. What lane is it that you are driving in? And by that, I mean sort of the ecosystem of who it is that you're talking to and who's likely to buy your product or hire you as a consultant. That's your lane. That lane cannot be wide. You are better off going narrow than wide. You cannot appeal to everyone. And I use the analogy of, when you go into a restaurant and you get one of those 5-page laminated menus with everything but the kitchen sink on that menu, you have no idea what's good. That menu does not lead you through. Here are the things that we're really good at. Here are our, offerings that you're going to really like. Instead, you're lost in this sea of options. You want to really narrow it. You want to say, this is my lane, I'm sticking to it. And particularly if you're just starting your business, you cannot spread yourself too thin. You'll end up with a murky perception of what it is that you do. You want to do, and some of you aren't going to like this, but you want to do one thing, you want to do it really well, and you want to shout it from the rooftops. So this is about knowing your customers, and I'm using an example of the Dove campaign, which some of you may remember, where they went from being kind of a generic beauty company with moisturizers and deodorant and stuff like that, to really deciding that their customers were a certain demographic of women of a certain age, with all kinds of body types and all kinds of hair and all kinds of challenges. And it was a market of probably a demographic of 45 to 65-year-old women. They're not trying to appeal to younger women. They're not trying to appeal to men. And they also figured out that their ideal customer wanted to be appreciated and respected, that beauty was not simply something for the young, but beauty could be cultivated and celebrated in older women. And that they were narrowing their lane, but they were celebrating their customers. And that has been a tremendously successful marketing campaign, and still is, for Dove. And I put the bullet in here. They're talking directly to these women, and if you look at their marketing campaign, you will see that it is bold and it is specific, and it tells you exactly what you're going to get by buying a Dove product. So the key story elements are: who's it about? What's it about? When did it take place, or does it take place? Where does it take place? And why is it important? Now, you're not always going to be able to check off each one of these boxes, but this is a framework when you're thinking about your story. So here are some successful brand stories, and I'm just going to kind of go through these quickly. Here's a bakery that was started because the owners had some great old family recipes, and they made them for friends and they made them for events, and people loved them. And this eventually grew into an organic bakery. But their story was, these are our family recipes, our family to yours. We value health, we value wellness. And so we are taking these family recipes and we're making and expanding them into an organic bakery. Peak Performance Consulting, here's a former corporate consultant who left the corporate world and turned into a leadership coach. You can see the morphing there from one thing to another. And the important thing in this, as in these other examples, is not just coach, but a leadership coach. So this person stands for, their values are creating and sustaining leaders and leadership within a whole spectrum of sectors. The jewelry example is interesting. This is an artist who created sort of therapeutic, turned a therapeutic jewelry hobby. Lots of things that make you feel better, into a full-fledged jewelry business on Etsy, which stands for this idea of beautiful things that enhance your well-being. Coffee is an obvious example. A lot of coffee roasters. This one stands for fair trade and global flavors. And so if that's something that's important to you, chances are you're going to want to do business with them. And then a personal trainer who worked individually with people turned it into a wellness studio, turned it into something that was broader than just, building up your muscles. So these are stories that all of these kinds of businesses can tell. This is how we started. This is what was important to us. This is why this continues to be something that we value and which we hope you will value too. So it takes it from the very specific, here's what we do, here's what we offer, to this higher level of something bigger than us, something bigger than the individual, something we support, and we hope that you will align with us because you support it too and buy what we have to do. This is a good example. Now, the American Red Cross obviously is not a small business. It's also a nonprofit. But here's a story that they use. And stories can be pure narrative, or they can be testimonials or quotes. Let's see if we can pick out the elements here. I just missed patients so much, says Dr. Charlotte Jacobs. That's the WHO. about why she came out of retirement to volunteer. The why: she came out of retirement to do what? To volunteer at the American Red Cross shelter. Where? In San Jose. Dr. Jacobs, and I'll show you how this plays out on social media. Dr. Jacobs what is she doing? She's providing hands-on care to residents at the shelter open. Why? In response to flooding in the area. Now, we're not all going to be as lucky as this, but this is an example of a story that the Red Cross uses to showcase one of their important services, which is emergency response. And you can say till the cows come home, the American Red Cross provides emergency response services across the world, but you're going to remember this story about Charlotte Jacobs. You're going to remember this transformation where she came out of retirement to volunteer to do something really important in response to. So I thought that was something interesting to show you. So what do you stand for? And we talked about this a little bit. As you define your identity, it's important to remember that you're more than just a business. And yes, you're in business to make money. You're in business to be in business for yourself. If you're in business for yourself, you're in business to share your expertise and get well paid for it. But you have to remember that you're more than just a business. And you are an experience, and you are a personality, and you are an entity that stands for something that you hope people will be loyal to you for. So here's part 2. Differentiation. We talked a little bit about this earlier. Differentiation. It's a jungle out there. It's very competitive. You may not be, the only bookstore in town, or you may not be the only consultant you may not be the only life coach that is battling for clients and customers. You have to differentiate yourself. And these are 3 examples of businesses that offer something more than just run-of-the-mill, in this case, first example, financial services. This accountant takes it one step further by providing financial education workshops for small business owners, and these are free. So chances are that if one of you goes to one of these free financial education workshops, you're probably gonna hire this accountant to be your accountant and to manage your finances, and this will create a perception in your mind of the value of this particular accountant or accounting firm. Consultants and coaches, perhaps you stand for sustainable business practices within large companies, and you go in and you consult even to small and medium-sized companies about, again, this is educational, about putting into practice sustainable businesses, practices, and methodologies. Or perhaps you're a coach who wants to imbue individual women or successful executives on a business side with a greater sense of themselves as leaders. And what you're actually selling is, a kind of professional fulfillment. I think bookstores are a great example, because here are independent bookstores. We all know that independent bookstores are kind of fighting for their life in the age of Amazon and the online commerce around books. So how do you draw? And it's so easy to order a book on Amazon. Why would I take the time to go to an independent bookstore to buy a physical book? A lot of people are loyal to independent bookstores, but nonetheless, bookstores have to generate, repeat customers, people who come back. How do they do that? They offer regular community events. They sponsor book clubs. They bring in famous authors to do signings. And so this becomes a resource for readers, for people who are into literature, for the community, etc. So this is adding something else that draws in potential clients, potential customers, and at the same time cements the brand as being a resource and something of value to people in the community. So that's about differentiation. So, I have worked with several accountants and small business CPAs in the past, and that's a very crowded field. And in each case, we have given them an identity that is memorable and identifiable. A quick example is that we, with one particular CPA, I said to them, "So what's the problem that you're solving?" And the woman looked at me and said, "What?" And I said, what's the pain point here?" And she said, and this was they work with small businesses, and the woman says to me, "Well, we kind of take the pain away." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" She said, "Well, if you're a small business owner, you wake up in the middle of the night worrying about accounting. You're worried about your taxes. You're worried about the IRS. You're worried about paying your bills." And I said, "Yeah, just like an aspirin, right?" And she said, "Yeah." So we developed a whole marketing campaign based on the concept of an aspirin. And people to this day, this was 15 years ago, think about this particular accounting firm as being an aspirin, and that's identifying the pain point and offering a solution. And so that she will often say, think of us as an aspirin. We're somebody that takes that headache away from you. It's a great example of a brand concept and story. So then we talked about this at the beginning. What's your benefit promise? Or what's your promise? In other words, what is it that I get? What is it that you promise me I will get if I do business with you? And so that your benefit promise, which is going to be part of your story, is you'll get exactly this, and this is why it's worth it. I'm going to tell you about FedEx in a minute, but then you're going to assure people, I promise that you will get the value that we're describing. I promise that you will get what we say we're going to give you, and that there are no surprises. And choosing us means something that no one else offers. So let's talk about FedEx for a minute. FedEx is a really clear example of the benefit promise. Their original tagline, which is still in effect, and many of you will know this, is when it absolutely positively has to be there overnight. That's their benefit promise. Now, a lot of us are not going to be able to come up with something as brilliant as that. When FedEx started, they were the only people who did this. This was a revolutionary concept. Now, of course, we have DHL and UPS and all those others, but FedEx owns that lane. They've always owned that lane. They will continue to own that lane. And their promise, when it absolutely positively has to be there overnight, and 9 times out of 10, that's exactly what they deliver. Their business would not be successful if that was just a sort of a nice thing to say. That promise is being challenged every single day, every time any one of us sends something by FedEx. And this means that they are, in a sense, differentiation has gotten a little more amorphous because they do have the competitors, but it's an emotional response. When you see FedEx, you don't even have to really think about it, because what you know is that it's absolutely positively going to be there overnight. UPS does not have a similar tagline. DHL doesn't, but FedEx, really is the king or queen or leader of that particular service, and has done it for a long time. So think about FedEx. I can give you other examples, but FedEx is really the best example of the benefit promise. What am I promising you as a potential customer? What is my promise? And you have to be sure that it's really something that you can guarantee. It can't be fuzzy. It has to be, we will sell you the best blueberry muffins in the East Coast that you've ever tasted, that taste just like your grandmother's. I don't care what it is, but you have to be able to prove it every single day. Then we have your call to action. And I will just say that I realize that we're racing through this stuff, but I'm really glad that you're going to get the PowerPoint, and you're also going to get the recording to go back over this. But hopefully this will give you a framework of the whole landscape here. Some of you may know what a call to action is, but let's just go over it. A call to action is a clear and compelling prompt that encourages new and existing customers to take a specific action. Most websites, marketing materials, e-newsletters, whatever they happen to be, are passive. They're just laying stuff out. They're just sort of, here's some information, here's this, here's that. But they're not active. In other words, you want, in any way that you are communicating in any sort of marketing, to tell people what you want them to do next. That's a call to action. What is it that you want people to do? Obviously, ultimately, you want them to buy from you, but there's a progression here, right? Which is, very few people are going to just buy it. You have to give them a certain experience and lead them by the hand almost to the point that they want to buy. This is particularly true for consultants and coaches. But you have to answer the question, what is it that you want people to do? So here are some examples of calls to action that are actually taken from websites and marketing materials of various companies. Join, okay? Active, active, active. Join our community of book lovers. Visit us today. This is not qualified. Visit us today. What are you going to get for doing that? 10% off your first purchase, or sign up for our newsletter. Those are active invitations to take the next step, to sample this bookstore in some important way. So here's for a life coach. Take, again, active verb. Take the first step. What do we want you to do? That first step towards your best self. That's the benefit promise. You will, if you're looking for self-improvement or to do things in a different way, we're looking at your best self. Book, another active. Your free discovery session, that's the what. And what are you going to get for doing that? You're going to start your journey for personal growth. You could almost use these, in fact, you could use these as blueprints for your call to action. Treat it like, the call to action Mad Libs. You just sort of fill in your own stuff here. And here's for a financial services small firm. Secure, again, active, your financial future, the what. Today, that's the when. Schedule, and then what you get, a complimentary consultation to discover personalized strategies. Those are really solid examples of calls to action. And this could be part of a small advertising campaign. It certainly would be a major part of your website. This would be calls to action that you would have, and then you'd have a link, find out more, sign up now, subscribe to our newsletter, that are attached to these. But this call to action is absolutely essential on your website. You've got to tell people, okay, I'm interested, but so now what do I do? And this is what you want them to do, to experience your business and actually get something tangible out of it. Your stories really matter, and I said this at the beginning, that we're all storytellers. You just don't know it. And hopefully you're going to be motivated after this session today to really think about your stories. But it's not easy. And you're not the only one who struggles with how to tell a story. And as I've said before, it's about the emotions, and it's about something other than facts. So finding your story. How do you find your story? Maybe it's about a person, or maybe it's about an event. Now, in the example of the Red Cross, it was about both. It was about this doctor, but it was also about the flooding. The Red Cross example, it was about a person. It was also about the needs of a community. It was a situation, a moment in time. We know where it happens. We know what the Red Cross did to address it, and we know what the impact was. And if you continue to see this on your website, you'd see that there was a donate button. They have many examples of their services throughout the world, and each one is, the call to action is to donate to that particular cause. So you have to identify the problem or need that that your potential customers have. What's the problem that you are the solution to? And then why should I choose you? There are other people who are gonna be the solution to my particular problem. So you have to that's the benefit promise, that's the differentiation, and then you need to include a call to action. So it's not just run of the mill. These are questions to ask yourself. Is it memorable? Does it have staying power? Am I going to walk out of your bookstore or your hairdressing salon and remember the interaction and the value that I got there? Um, is there Have you been able to articulate the vision? And what I mean by vision is, why did you start your business in the first place? I love those stories. That can be a very powerful story for your brand. Think about the family recipes turning into an organic bakery. Um, you know, the founding of your business, or your passion for, you didn't start your business just because it was a good idea. You started because you had a vision, you had a passion, you had an interest in putting all of your energies and working 7 days a week to get it off the ground, because of this vision that you have. My vision when I left higher education, or really sort of throughout my career, has, this is going to sound trite, but is really to bring the concepts, the principles, and the opportunities of branding to small and medium-sized businesses, as well as to small to medium-sized nonprofits, people and organizations that can't afford the big agencies, that don't really know on a shoestring and with little to no staff how to brand. And that's been my overriding passion and dedication for many years. It also comes from my heart, right? Because I really love that light bulb that goes off when people suddenly see the power of their brand and what their brand can do, and when they put it into practice through social media, through marketing, whatever. That's really exciting to me. It's never just about the facts. So okay, so I thought we'd take a moment here to hear some of your stories. What I'd like to do is, if you can say that you want to share in the chat. I'd like to know what your business is and what you think the brand is or could be. And I will be glad to briefly respond to that. So it's a little bit like an online brainstorm. And we have, time for probably 3 of these. And then we'll go into the rest of the presentation. So
Well, we have several people who have jumped the gun, so to speak.
Oh yeah, I can't see it, so you might.
Okay, yes, I will tell you. So we have Fawn Anderson, who is a voice actor. So and she's female, kind, and she has a compassionate voice. And what else about Fawn here?
Is it Fawn?
Fawn, Fawn.
Okay. Well, I have a few thoughts about that. Um, talk about being a brutal marketplace. I have a son who's an actor, and so I'm well versed in this. But particularly being a voice actor, the competition is severe. I think the biggest, I mean, I have no doubt that you're good at what you do. My question to you would be, what sets you apart? Why should I hire you? I think that your origin story would be critically important here. Here's why I became a voice actor. Here's why the spoken word is so important to me. Here's the value that I place on building character into the spoken word, that it's not simply my voice. You're also getting my interpretive, my whole kind of shaping of whatever it is that I'm reading into something that is memorable, compelling, and resonant. That would be the kind of thing, those kinds of words that I would use, because you want to tell your origin story. Why did you start doing this? Because of your passion for the spoken word as done by a professional actor. That is memorable to me. So I would go along those lines, and don't be afraid to be bold, because you have, again, a very tough marketplace, and standing out is not easy. You're going to have to convey your passion, but also be very tactical about it. So that's my thought about that. I hope that's helpful, Fawn.
Okay, we also have Lance Potvin, um, who wrote to me earlier, Lance, but I don't think you answered Lyn's question. So why don't you take a moment to do that? And meanwhile, um, we have Jenny Monroy, who helps customers keep their homes clean and ready for them to enjoy it. So she has a cleaning service.
Interesting, Jenny. I again, I'm thinking on my feet here. Um, I think, again, your origin story, why you started this business, would be an important part of your narrative. I think that narrative has to be very personal. In other words, there are a lot of cleaning companies that just drive around with a bunch of people in the car and cleaning stuff in the trunk, and they come in and do it and leave. I think yours should be, here's what I can do for you. I will love your home as much as I love my own. I will pay attention to the smallest details. I will do all the things that are important to you. I will put, I'm again brainstorming here. I will put, I will make sure that the pictures are straight on the wall. I will make sure that I use the products. In other words, that it becomes a customized service business. And what's your passion for that? Your passion for that is people. Your passion for that is order that creates peace, that creates, peace of mind and well-being. In other words, taking it up to that other level, from just a clean house to an ordered, calm, peace of mind life within one's home. And that home, I would also take it a further level, and I'm again kind of probably going off the rails here a little bit, but I would take it up the further level to your home is the most basic element, one of the most basic elements of your well-being. It is the place that is your refuge, and it is the place where you bring friends. There's nothing more important. In other words, building on the whole idea of home. So that's my thought. It's a big concept, but I think you could really work with that. And I think that, again, that's about building trust and loyalty. People have to trust you to come into their homes. They have to trust you that you're going to do the things that make them feel good, and that builds loyalty. You want to have long-term customers. So that's my thought about that, Jenny. I hope that's helpful.
So we have Michelle Black is a jewelry artist, and
Mhm.
she fuses a powdered glass into an actual penny. She carefully preserves the date on the back of the penny, and customers can connect to a special date, whether it's their birthday or grandparents' birthday. She calls it a lucky penny.
I love that.
That's kind of narrow.
Yeah, I love that. I think a couple things. I think it'd be very important for you, Michelle, to identify who your ideal customer is. Who is it that, I don't know what the price point on this is. I assume that they're not inexpensive since it's so customized and since it's glass. I think you have to identify who's the most likely person to buy this, and then to sort of target those people. I think the universality here is that we all want to mark important dates in our lives. And I think celebrating personal history, personal legacy, um, paying it forward to the future for grandchildren, for, that you're really, it's keepsake, it's preservation, it's sort of celebrating the history. I think I'd build a campaign around celebrating the moments of our lives, celebrating the history of our lives. And the penny, I would play with the tagline, pay it forward. something like that, because you're talking about the penny, pennies that pay it forward, going into the future. I also think that there's uh, a wonderful artistic quality to this. This is not something that, you're not buying gold coins off an 800 number infomercial. This is highly customized, highly personalized, highly artistic, and so it is unique. Why buy from? That answers the question of why. Why should I buy from you rather than someone else? Because there's nothing else like this. Period. You've got an easy benefit promise here. Your challenge is to tie this into keepsake for the future, carrying on a legacy, one's personal history, celebrating the important moments of our life. I think celebrating the important moments in our lives is really the key here, and a vision of the future.
You want more?
Yeah, why don't we do one more?
Okay. I have Angelica Sharma, who's an ex-corporate executive with 29 years of corporate experience, and her mission of her nonprofit foundation is to transform lives of people in recovery by providing clean, sober homes in safe neighborhoods.
Wow, that's huge, Angelica. I again would be really interested in why you started a nonprofit, why you left corporate. I can guess that you wanted to find more meaning in your life and to provide, a more direct impact to your community. I think that it's. I think that this is about. I don't think it's as much about the nonprofit itself as far as the story goes, because that's pretty self-explanatory. What you do, who it benefits, how it's impacted. I would do two things. First of all, I would get testimonials very much, or shape stories very much like the Red Cross example. I came to this X nonprofit because this is how it completely changed my life. I am now XYZ. I think those first person testimonies, even if you get real testimonials but make up the names to protect people, I think we have to hear first person stories about how your nonprofit changed their life. I also, and that's your primary sort of storefront here. I think the other thing that's really important here is, why did you leave corporate life to do this? Tell me that story, because that's going to motivate me to align myself with you and support what you are doing because you made this bold move. So I think you've got great material here, Angelica, and I wish you luck with it. I think it's an important story to tell.
Okay.
Yeah. So in order to leave more time for your questions, social media. We're going to talk a little bit about how do you tell your stories, right? And obviously the central place, repository, showcase, marquee for your stories are your website, period. And that I liken websites to the core of a bicycle wheel. So you've got the website. If you picture a bicycle wheel, you've got at that center, whatever you call it, that's the website. And all the spokes, whether it's social media, whether it's email marketing, whether it's events, whatever it is, comes off that central hub. They also feed back into the central hub, but the website is the primary carrier of your brand message, and all of your vehicles for carrying that message lead to and from your website. Certainly social media. It's a big thing. The mistake I see small business owners make again and again, and I've certainly made it myself. Again, this is being all things to all people. You suddenly think you have to be on every platform. You have to be on Facebook. You have to be on Instagram. You have to do LinkedIn. Oh God, I have to do TikTok. And it's overwhelming. I say, pick one, pick two that are easy. Start out there. If you're going to do Instagram and TikTok effectively, you've got to be churning out at least one video a day. Now, you don't have time to do that. You got to run your business. So let's pick your battles. You can manage LinkedIn. You can probably manage Facebook, but take it slowly. And once you've sort of built that up, then you can think about branching out. But just don't bite off more than you can chew. The world will not punish you for not paying attention to social media 24 hours a day. So here's an example on Instagram, now that I've told you not to do it, of how stories play out on social media. So if you're developing stories for your business, you're going to want to put them on whatever platform you're working on. So here's Feeding America. Kimberly Harris founded Women's HQ, a nonprofit uplifting women of color who experience domestic violence and sexual assault. Quote, and the quotes are really important. I speak from experience. I was that girl in the shelter. So that's a great story. And then here's one for a food bank volunteer for Feeding America who found meaning in World Cancer Day that was sponsored by Feeding for America. And here's her story and people commenting on it. So you can take a picture with your cell phone and you can instantly put this on Facebook, either on your personal page, which I recommend, but also if you start a business page. So that's an easy peasy way of doing social media. Here's Facebook. Again, American Red Cross. You're going to think that I only think about the American Red Cross, but they have really good concrete examples of people benefiting from what it is that they do. And you can look at these when you get the PowerPoint. We're going to stop in a minute to take more questions. But I get asked the question all the time, and I am really sympathetic to this, that most of us think that branding is a luxury because we simply don't have the resources to do it. I come across this with small and medium-sized nonprofits all the time, where you have a very small staff and you have the person who does your bookkeeping also doing a little bit of marketing, and you have, the person who's managing, outreach, who is in charge of social media, and everybody's going nuts. And it's really difficult to, you can't afford, in most cases, a dedicated communications, branding, marketing person. So you have to, again, pick your battles, decide what's important. My advice is to make your website as good as it can possibly be, filled with these kinds of impact stories, origin stories, calls to action. Start there. Make that as good as you can make it. If you can hire somebody to help you do it, great. But you can do it yourself. You can do it yourself with Squarespace. You can do it with other things. Learn how to do it. Your website is your most important marketing tool, period, end of sentence, dot, dot, that's it. So concentrate on your website. And, I have volunteers down here because you can reach out to friends, you can reach out to colleagues, you can reach out to even clients in some cases. If, for instance, you need help with social media, ask your teenagers. But limited resources does not mean no branding. Limited resources means deciding what you can do by yourself, what you need help with, if you can afford to hire somebody, and then having a long-term plan so that if you can't do it all right now, maybe you can do it in 6 months. I think, though, that the message here, even if it's just you and your computer, you have to have a brand, and a brand is no good unless you tell people about it, unless you tell people what your brand is. You can't just have your brand sort of sit in a drawer over here. It's got to immediately come to life on your website, and eventually come to life on social media, and come to life in all of the outreach that you do to potential clients that hopefully you will have targeted and who are ready and willing to do business with you. So here's some other suggestions. Just share your brand everywhere. I don't care what it is. Add a call to action to your email signature. That's one of the best things you can possibly do. Copy one of the examples of my calls to action, maybe cut it down into one sentence, but add a linked call to action to your email signature. Add a link to your website on your email signature. Put links everywhere. If you have an email newsletter, add a link to your signature. Yes, your signature will look big, but yes, it will also look like you're very serious. I mentioned personal Facebook pages. Don't ignore your personal Facebook page, because that's really, for a lot of us, where we have a very big audience. You also can set up what's known, and you probably know this, a business Facebook page. If you want to do things like Facebook Live events and sort of cultivate a community, I strongly suggest that you do some research on Facebook business pages. And if if you feel like it and you have the resources, Instagram stories and reels are really important, but you don't have to do them right now. I'm a big fan of LinkedIn. I don't care what kind of business you are running. I think that you need a LinkedIn profile. I think your LinkedIn profile showcases your brand. In other words, it's written why I started this, what I do, who I help, and why it's important. I do LinkedIn profiles and pages for people all the time as they're rebranding themselves. And then as you begin to do new email newsletters or new stories, you post those to LinkedIn. So that's it. We've got about 25 minutes for questions, clarifications, Rotten Tomatoes, whatever you would like to ask me about. I think two guidelines: clarification, if you want clarification on something that I've talked about, or questions relating to, developing your own brand. So Arlene, I'll let you be the ringmaster here.
Sure. Well, we definitely have some people who had previously asked for some brand help. If we want to just start with that.
Sure.
We had Audrey Salazar, and she is, I'm hoping she's still with us. She handles something called diminished value claims, which most people, she says, do not understand and don't know much about. For instance, if you've lost value in your vehicle due to someone else's negligence. So she's saying that often you can submit a claim and be compensated for that. So that's a challenge.
Okay, that's actually, I'm really glad that you asked this question, that you gave us this example, because it's an important thing that needs some mentioning. There's an educational component that we all have to be aware of. In this case, you are actually educating your potential customers and clients. Yeah, who knows what diminished value claims is, and who even knows that it's possible? So your job here is to set sort of that educational parameter. And I would start out by saying, I bet you don't know what diminished value claims are, and the fact that they're available to you. In other words, name the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room is we don't know what the heck diminished value claims are, but they could be really valuable to us. And I, meaning you, understand this, and I can help you with evaluate claims and whether to file one. And here's what the impact is that you'll be reimbursed for X. So you've got an, 1 + 2 = 3 equation here, but what you begin with is the educational component. This is what I do. It's very specific, but guess what? It may be something that will benefit you, and here's how.
Yeah, great. And early on, we had actually one of our the first person who logs in, and he said he has a great brand. This is Rambam Gayatri. He has a great brand, but the name of it is a stumbling block. The word is prasad, Prasad, probably pronouncing it wrong. It's a Sanskrit word meaning to edify continuously. So,
Yeah, that's tough. Uh,
yeah, I mean,
I-
I guess depending on the audience, I would challenge why you would name it something that is so esoteric, unless you're trying to reach out to
a very specific audience, yes.
exactly.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I think I'm working with a couple of clients now whose names just don't work. Uh,
yeah,
but they all think, and I'm not saying, Ram, that you think this, but they all think everybody recognizes the name and they can't change it. Well, the fact is you can. You know, you're not Nike. You don't really have brand recognition. You can easily do a name change if you plan for it in advance. I was working with a nonprofit dance company, and they actually did have a fair amount of brand recognition, but their offering had changed. And so the name no longer reflected what they did. So we worked for a year on setting the stage for that name change. If that's not something that you want to do, and I completely get it, and you do have name recognition that you feel is important, you have an educational job here. You have to immediately tell people, this is what this is why it's important, and this is why what I do is important. And this name encapsulates that. You too, um, uh, like Angelica, have an educational component here. You have to set the stage. Don't, there are a lot of drug companies right now that you'll see their ads on television, and the names are just bizarre. And they will tell you what the name means right off the bat. And that's really, I think, your challenge is to justify that name that is challenging to remember and that people don't understand. You have to imbue it with the value. It sounds like what you do is really interesting, but you have to tell people why it's important to them and what they'll get. So that the name has some heavy lifting to do.
yes. So earlier on, I don't know if Gloria Byfield is still with us, but she um she's offering people a unique employment opportunity through her commercial and residential cleaning company. And she's specifically targeting people who can't thrive in the traditional workforce due to domestic violence or criminal history, disability, or citizenship. So she's trying to incorporate and introduce her purpose and mission um, through her logo or name, and wondering how she could do better with that, which might be a lot to ask you, Lynn.
Well, I think it brings up I think it brings up a point that I want to cover, which is logos are not a brand. A lot of people make the mistake because logos are kind of the fun part, right? And everybody thinks, oh, I'm gonna, great, let's design a logo with no brand underneath it to support it. So the logo is meaningless. And it's the cart before the horse here, that you design the logo and then you kind of figure out sort of what it stands for. Great brands, and I mean great small business brands, grow authentically, organically out of the stories and the raison d'etre and the purposes of the business itself. Then you design the logo, then you have, based on that value, based on the service, based on absolutely positively have to be there overnight, you design a logo so that the logo is the visual representation of the brand, and it's not something that is untethered to the important work of carrying the brand message out. So that's I often have clients who come to me and they say, "Oh, here's my logo," and I say, "Well, what does it mean?" And, "Well, I like the colors."
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, yeah.
that doesn't work. Plain and simple. Um, Form follows function. That's a good way to remember it. Figure out the function and then design it. It's not about pretty colors, and it's certainly not about taglines. We've talked a lot about taglines today, but I am not a fan unless a tagline absolutely works. Um, uh, I would say stay away from taglines for now and let the tagline grow organically out of your business as it evolves. You don't have to have a tagline, but you do need to have a logo that works and is working for you. And obviously, it has to be recognizable and it has to be something people like to look at. But do not make the mistake of letting that carry all the brand water. It never will. So, oh, and the other part, I don't know how to address the brand here for, I guess, again, it's like the elephant in the room. If you're putting a team together, or you're putting an offering that says, I want to employ people who are not, who are traditionally difficult to hire, you have to address the question for your customer,
Right.
me, why would I want to do that? I'm bringing them into my home. Why would I, in other words, so you have to address the larger question, the larger value here, the larger principle and human aspirations of trying to reshape the lives of people who have had a tough time. But you also have the double job of the educational piece of, why should I do this? Why should I, the homeowner or the business, if it's a business cleaning service for businesses, it sounds risky to me. You have to educate me as to why it's not, and enable me to trust you that you have vetted, done background checks, all that stuff. Because as an uninitiated person in social services or in that kind of sector, it makes me kind of go, well, why would I want to do it? So you've got to answer the why, I
Yeah,
think.
I think that's an excellent point.
you know
Um,
um, yeah.
I have Sarah here, Sarah Musson, who has a branding question. She's a photographer. She has over 20 years experience, but it's been on and off. And she doesn't really have a 20-year portfolio to back that up. And she wants to share with clients that she has experience, but um, I guess she doesn't have as much current or consistent work to use for that.
Well, I think that's a little bit like women who've been out of the workforce for raising families. How do you cover that gap? Um, I don't think there's an answer for that. But I think that if I'm hearing you right, your business has sort of leveled off. That maybe you haven't been, I don't know whether you do weddings or whether you do, commercial work. I don't know what kind of photography you do. It almost doesn't matter. I think, again, this comes down to two things. Three, your portfolio. It doesn't matter whether the picture was taken 10 years ago. If it's a good photograph, it's a good photograph. So your portfolio, have it done professionally. Portfolios have taken on a new life with the internet. They're beautiful, beautiful portfolios. So you've got to have a great portfolio. Again, this comes down to testimonials, people that have hired you to work for them. It doesn't matter how long ago it was. What matters is their endorsement of you as an interpreter of their event or their venue or their landscape that only you could have done. And you have to make the case for why that's something that only your vision, your artistic vision, could have done that. So there's a little bit of upfront work here, which is you've got to get testimonials from people. And your brand is about why your vision is unique. And, I don't know, do you photograph people? Do you photograph architecture? What's your passion for the thing that you photograph? What do you want to be known for? If you are a photographer who photographs real estate, houses, you want to sell to realtors, right? Because they want to use your photographs to showcase their work. So narrow your lane. Don't photograph everything. Decide what it is you do really well. Maybe it's people's gardens. Maybe it's children. Who knows? But stake your claim, define your lane, get testimonials, have a great portfolio and figure out how you're going to describe your vision and why it's different than anybody else's. What's the value I get from hiring you?
Okay, that's great. So I think we're done. I don't have any more questions.
Okay. Um,
And
I
everyone, and Sarah says thank you.
So, you're welcome. I always think of my best questions when I'm left an event and I'm driving home. So, if you think of other questions and you want to email me, I am more than happy to answer them within reason. I'm also happy to, share what I have to share on my website, which is lynchamberlin.com. I'm also a recent convert to Substack. You can subscribe to my Substack newsletter. I'm a huge Substack fan now. And my newsletter comes out weekly, and it's a mixture of personal branding as well as institutional and nonprofit and business branding, like real talk from a real person about real branding. So I encourage you to go to my website and sign up for my newsletter. And of course, LinkedIn, you can find me on all the things that are there. So I want to thank everybody for joining. I appreciate your hanging in here. This was a lot of information, but I wish you real luck with your brand. It's not easy, but it is worth it. And I just will leave you with one thing, which is it's not optional. You need a brand. So
Yeah,
thanks, everybody.
I agree. All right, everyone. Thank you so much.